The sunrise bleeding across the Oklahoma sky looked like God had cut himself open and bled gold and crimson across the horizon. And Laura Evans stood with her brush poised above canvas, knowing she would never let this one go either. It was 1883, and the town of Kingfisher had sprung up almost overnight after the land run, filled with dusty dreams and desperate hopes. Laura had arrived 6 months ago with her father, who had died 2 weeks after they built their small house on the edge of town. A fever took him fast, and she buried him beside 3 other graves in the new cemetery, where the prairie grass still grew wild between the markers. She should have gone back east. That was what respectable women did when they found themselves alone. But something about this raw, unfinished land called to her. The sunrises here were different than anything she had seen in Missouri. They were violent and beautiful and honest in a way that made her chest ache, so she stayed. She took in sewing and mending, did laundry for the saloon girls and the hotel, and every morning before the town woke, she painted. Always sunrises, never sunsets. There was something about the beginning of the day that felt like hope, even when she had none. The paintings accumulated in her small house, leaning against every wall, stacked in corners. When Mrs. Patterson from the general store asked to buy one, Laura refused. When the new schoolteacher offered her a month's salary for the one with the purple clouds, Laura said no. She could not explain why, even to herself. They were hers. They were the only things in this world that belonged completely to her, that she had made with her own hands, that could not be taken by fever or drought or the casual cruelty of circumstance. She was finishing the highlights on the clouds when she heard the horse approaching. That was unusual. Most people did not ride out this direction so early. Her house sat apart from the main town, closer to the open prairie where the land still dreamed of being wild. The rider was tall in the saddle, his silhouette dark against the brightening sky. As he drew closer, she could see he was young, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face that looked like it had seen too much sun and not enough easy days. He sat his horse like he had been born on it. "Morning, miss," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was rough like gravel settling after rain. "Morning," Laura replied, not setting down her brush. She was 22 and had learned that being alone made men think certain things. The brush in her hand felt like a small defense, a reminder that she was busy, that she had purpose. "Name's James Zimmerman. I work the Rocking K Ranch about 15 miles northwest." He swung down from his horse, moving with an easy grace. Up close, she could see his eyes were a strange light brown, almost amber in the early light. "I was riding fence line early and saw you out here painting. Hope I am not intruding." Laura Evans. "And you are on my property, Mr. Zimmerman, so I suppose you are intruding, though I will give you the benefit of assuming you did not mean to be rude." Something flickered across his face. Not offense, but something like respect. "You are right. I apologize. I just never saw anyone paint a sunrise before. Seems like something worth seeing." She should have sent him away. Instead, she found herself turning the canvas slightly so he could see it better. They are different every morning. No two are ever the same. He stepped closer, studying the painting with an intensity that surprised her. Most people glanced at art the way they glanced at everything else, just looking to say they had looked. But James Zimmerman stared at her painting like he was trying to memorize it. "My mother used to say that about snowflakes," he said finally. "She died when I was 12. Winters seem all the same now." Laura did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She added another stroke of gold to the canvas. "You sell these?" he asked. "No. Why not?" It was a fair question. She did not have a fair answer. "They are mine." He nodded slowly like that made perfect sense. I have a bunk at the ranch, 4 walls and a roof, no pictures. It feels like living in a box sometimes. So buy a picture. I want to buy yours. I just said I do not sell them. I know what you said. He pulled off his hat, turning it in his hands. But I am asking anyway, how many you got? The question surprised her. I have not counted. Could I see them? This was madness. She should send him away. Instead, Laura found herself saying, "They are in the house." His face lit up with a smile that transformed him completely. It was like watching the sun break over the horizon. Could I look? I promise I will not touch anything. I will not even step inside if you would rather. You could bring them to the door. She studied him. He had good hands, scarred and calloused but clean. His clothes were worn but mended carefully. And there was something in his face, some hunger that was not about her body but about what she created, that made her decide to take the risk. You can come in, but I am keeping my rifle by the door. Fair enough. She propped her wet canvas against the side of the house and led him inside. The interior was small but neat. She had made it hers with the few things she brought from Missouri. Her mother's quilt on the bed, her father's books on the shelf, and everywhere, the paintings. James Zimmerman stood in the doorway and went completely still. Lord have mercy, he breathed. There were 47 of them. She knew because she had finally counted last week. 47 sunrises, each one different. Angry reds and soft pinks, purple bruises of cloud and gold that looked like honey poured across the sky. Some were peaceful. Some looked like the sky was at war with itself. All of them were honest. He walked slowly through the room, looking at each one. He did not touch, just as he promised. He spent almost 5 minutes staring at one she had painted in August, where the sunrise came up orange and furious behind a wall of dark clouds. This one, he said finally. This one looks like how I feel most days. And how is that? Like there is something bright trying to break through, but the darkness is not ready to let go yet. Laura felt something shift in her chest. Yes, she said quietly, that is exactly right. He turned to look at her. I want to buy them all, she laughed. She could not help it. You cannot afford them all. How do you know? Because you are a ranch hand and I am not a fool. I have been saving my pay for 3 years. I was going to buy some land, maybe start my own small spread. But this. He gestured at the paintings. This is better than land. Land you can build on. These are just canvas and paint. No, he said firmly. These are why we need the land. What is the point of having a home if there is nothing in it that makes you feel alive? She stared at him. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. I cannot sell them, she said, but her voice was less certain now. Why not? Because they are all I have. James Zimmerman looked at her for a long moment. Then what if I did not take them away? What if I bought them but they stayed here and I just came to visit them sometimes? That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Is it? I work dawn to dusk 6 days a week. I could ride over on Sundays just to look at them for a while. Would that be all right? This was madness. Complete madness. But Laura found herself nodding. How much? He asked. She named a price that was half what they were worth, and he countered with double what she asked. They settled somewhere in the middle, though she suspected he still overpaid. He rode back to the ranch and returned 3 hours later with cash in a leather pouch. I will come Sunday morning if that is all right, he said, pressing the money into her hands. Early, before church. I do not go to church. Neither do I. Seems like God is more present in a sunrise than in a building anyway. After he left, Laura sat in her small house surrounded by paintings that were now his, feeling like the world had tilted slightly sideways. She counted the money 3 times. It was enough to live on for 8 months, maybe more if she was careful. She could stop taking in laundry. She could paint more. She could not explain why that made her cry. Sunday morning came with a sky like pearls, all soft gray and pink. Laura was outside painting when she heard the horse. James Zimmerman rode up wearing clean clothes, his hair still damp like he had dunked his head in the water trough before coming. Mourning, Miss Evans. Miss Evans seems formal for a man who owns 47 of my paintings. You can call me Laura. Then you should call me James. He swung down from his horse and came to stand beside her, watching her work. He did not talk, just watched, and somehow his silence was not awkward. It felt companionable. When she finished, he said, "Could I see the others again?" They went inside and he looked at each painting like he was greeting old friends. He spent a long time with the August sunrise. "I should tell you why I like this one so much," he said finally. "You do not owe me explanations. I know, but I want to tell you." He took a breath. "My father was not a good man. He drank, and when he drank, he used his fists. My mother took most of it, tried to keep him away from me and my sister. But after Ma died, there was no buffer. I left home at 14, took my sister with me. She was only 8. Laura set down her brush. "We worked our way west, doing whatever jobs we could find. She got sick in Kansas, pneumonia. I did not have money for a doctor. She died in a boarding house room, and I was 16 years old burying my baby sister in a town where I did not know a single soul. James, I am so sorry. I am not telling you for sympathy. I am telling you because for a long time I was just that darkness, just the clouds with no light behind them. Then I came west for real, got the job at the Rocking K, and I started to feel like maybe there was something in me worth saving. Your painting, that is what it looks like. That is what hope looks like when you have been without it for a while. It is not easy or pretty, but it is fighting." Laura felt tears on her cheeks. "That is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said about my work. It is the truth." He looked at her. "You paint truth. That is rare." He stayed for 2 hours, drinking the coffee she made, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about the ranch, about the cattle and the horses and the long days under the sun. She told him about Missouri, about her father's dream of owning land, about how she could not leave because this place had gotten into her blood somehow. When he left, he said, "Same time next Sunday, same time." It became a ritual. Every Sunday morning, James rode over before dawn. He would watch her paint the new sunrise. Then they would go inside and he would visit his paintings. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. He brought her things: fresh beef from a slaughtered steer, a sack of good coffee, a new brush when he noticed her old ones wearing down. "You do not have to bring me things," she said. "You already paid for the paintings." "I know, I want to." She started to know him. She learned that he had taught himself to read from an old Bible his mother had left him, that he was afraid of deep water because he had nearly drowned as a child, that he wanted his own ranch someday but was not sure he would ever have it, that he thought the stars looked different in Oklahoma than anywhere else he had been. She learned the way his face changed when he smiled, the way his hands moved when he talked about horses, the way he looked at her paintings like they held answers to questions he did not know how to ask. And she learned, slowly and then all at once, that she was falling in love with him. It terrified her. Love had always meant loss in her experience. Her mother had died when she was 10. Her father had left her alone in a town that was barely more than a collection of buildings and hope. She had built walls around herself, and James Zimmerman was dismantling them brick by brick, just by showing up and seeing her, really seeing her. It was October when things changed. James rode up on a Sunday morning, and she could see immediately that something was different. He looked tired, older somehow. "What is wrong?" she asked. "The ranch is being sold. New owner is bringing his own crew." Her heart dropped. "When, end of the month, I am out of a job." "What will you do?" There is work down in Texas. Big ranches always need hands. Or I could try Kansas, work the railroad maybe. Texas, Kansas. The words felt like distances too far to cross. That is far away, she said carefully. I know. He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Laura, I need to tell you something. All right. I did not buy those paintings because I wanted pictures on a wall. I bought them because they were yours, and I wanted a reason to see you again. I wanted a reason to come back every Sunday. And now I have 47 reasons, but they are all just excuses for the real reason. What is the real reason? You know what it is. I can see it in your face that you know. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Tell me anyway. I love you. I think I have loved you since that first morning when you turned that canvas so I could see it better. Like what you created mattered enough to share even though you were afraid. I love the way you paint truth. I love that you see the world in light and color. I love that you are brave enough to stay in a place that took everything from you because you decided it was yours. I love you, Laura Evans, and I do not want to go to Texas or Kansas or anywhere else that is not wherever you are. She could not breathe. I have nothing. Just a small house and paintings I will not sell, except I did sell them, and I cannot even explain why except that it was you and you understood. I have nothing either. Just 3 years of saved pay, minus what I gave you, and a horse and a saddle and a heart that is yours if you want it. I want it. The words came out fierce, certain. I love you too. I did not mean to, but I do. You come here every Sunday and you see me, not just the paintings but me, and I cannot remember the last time anyone really saw me before you. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and kissed her. His lips were warm and he tasted like coffee and hope, and Laura wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back like he was air and she had been drowning. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. I know it is fast, I know we have only known each other a few months, but I am sure, I have never been more sure of anything. Where would we go? Anywhere, everywhere, nowhere. I do not care as long as we are together. Laura pulled back just enough to look at him. I want to stay here in Kingfisher. This is my home. Then we stay. I will find work. There are other ranches, or I can hire on with someone in town. We will make it work. You said you wanted your own land. I want you more. She kissed him again, softer this time, tender. Yes, yes, I will marry you. They were married 2 weeks later by the Justice of the Peace, with Mrs. Patterson and her husband standing as witnesses. Laura wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk. James wore a new shirt he bought special for the occasion. They spoke their vows in the small office that smelled of pipe smoke and ink, and when James kissed his bride, Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears. James moved into Laura's small house. It was cramped with 2 people, made more so by the paintings everywhere, but neither of them minded. James found work quickly at her ranch closer to town, and Laura kept painting, but something had shifted. Now when she painted the sunrise, James was there beside her, and when she looked at the colors bleeding across the sky, she thought not just about hope but about joy, about love, about a future she had not dared to imagine. I want to hang them, James said one morning in November, about a month after their wedding. The paintings, our paintings, I want to hang them in our house. Laura looked around the small room. There is not enough wall space. Then we will build a bigger house. We have the money I saved. We could build something right here, where your father built the first house. We could make it big enough for all the sunrises and all the ones you have not painted yet. That would take most of your savings, our savings, and I cannot think of anything better to spend it on. They hired a carpenter from town, a quiet man named Mr. Harrison who had built half the buildings in Kingfisher. Laura showed him what she wanted, A house with big windows facing east to catch the sunrise, and walls, so many walls to hang paintings. "You are building a gallery," Mr. Harrison said, not unkindly. "We are building a home," James corrected. "It just happens to be a home for art, too." Construction took 2 months. While they waited, Laura and James lived in the small original house, and Laura painted. She painted the winter sunrise, all cold blues and distant gold. She painted the morning after their first snow, when the sky was white and gray and the world looked new. She painted the sunrise on Christmas morning, when James gave her a set of brushes he had ordered special from Kansas City, and she gave him a painting she had kept hidden, one she had done from memory of how the sky looked the morning he first rode up to her house. "I was painting this when you arrived," she explained. "When I saw you coming, I put it away and started a new one, but I finished this one later. This is the sunrise that brought you to me." James held the painting like it was made of something more precious than gold. "I will treasure this forever. I know." The house was finished in February. It was not large by some standards, but to Laura and James, it was a palace. The front room had walls that stretched 12 feet high and windows that flooded the space with light. They spent a week hanging paintings, James carefully hammering nails while Laura directed placement. When they were done, they stood in the center of the room and turned slowly, surrounded by sunrises. "It is like living inside hope," James said quietly. Laura took his hand. "It is like living inside love." That night, they made love in their new house with the moon shining through the eastern windows, and Laura thought about how her life had become something she could never have painted, something too beautiful and strange and perfect to capture on canvas. Winter gave way to spring and spring to summer. James worked the ranch and Laura painted. She started selling some of her new work, not the sunrises but other things, portraits of horses, landscapes of the Oklahoma plains, still lifes of wildflowers. People in town started calling her the artist, and they commissioned pieces for their homes and businesses. But the sunrises, those she kept, those were hers and James's. Every morning she painted a new one, and every Sunday James would choose one from the week and they would hang it, adding to their growing collection. "We are going to run out of walls again," Laura said one July morning. "Then we will build another room." "James, we cannot just keep building rooms for paintings." "Why not?" she laughed, but he was serious. "What if we need the space for something else someday?" Like what? She had not meant to tell him yet, had wanted to be absolutely sure, but the words came out anyway. "Like a nursery." James went very still. "Laura, are you saying?" "I am saying I am fairly certain I am pregnant." He let out a shout of joy that probably scared every bird within a mile and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "Careful, you are going to make me sick." He set her down gently, immediately contrite. "Sorry, I am just so happy. Laura, we are going to have a baby." "I know, I am terrified." "Me too, but we will figure it out together." Their son was born in March of 1885, on a morning when the sunrise was soft pink and gold. Laura had painted until the day before her labor started, and James had been beside her, holding her hand and telling her she was the strongest person he knew. They named him Thomas, after Laura's father. He had James's dark hair and Laura's green eyes, and from the first moment James held him, Laura knew her husband was completely lost to love. "I did not know," James said softly, staring down at his son. "I did not know I could love anything this much." "I know," Laura whispered. "I know exactly what you mean." Thomas grew, and the house filled with new sounds, crying and cooing and laughter. Laura painted less frequently those first months, too exhausted and consumed with caring for an infant. But James would bring her coffee in the mornings and take the baby so she could paint at least one sunrise a week. "You need this," he said. "It is part of who you are. You know me so well. I have been studying you for 2 years now. I plan to study you for the rest of my life." When Thomas was 6 months old, Laura started painting again in earnest. She had to adjust her schedule, painting during his naps, but she found a rhythm, and something had changed in her work. The sunrises had always been about hope, but now they held something more. They held contentment, joy. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be. James had advanced at the ranch, become the foreman, which meant better pay and more respect. He still rode home every evening to his wife and son, to the house full of sunrises, and every time he walked through the door, Laura saw him look around with wonder, like he still could not quite believe this was his life. "What are you thinking?" she asked him one evening. "I am thinking about the morning I first saw you painting, how I almost did not stop. I was supposed to be checking fence line and I was already behind. But something made me ride over. I think it was the luckiest decision I ever made. I am glad you stopped." "Me too." Time moved the way it does, in moments that felt endless and years that flew past. Thomas learned to walk, then to run. Laura taught him colors and James taught him about horses. They added another room to the house, not for paintings but for their growing family. A daughter came in 1887, whom they named Rose because she was born on a morning when the sunrise was the color of pink roses. Then another son in 1889, Samuel, born under a sky of gold and amber. The house was full and loud and chaotic, and Laura had never been happier. She still painted every sunrise she could, though some days the children needed her or life intervened. But James had been right that first day. The paintings mattered. They were a record of her life, of every morning she had been granted in this wild, beautiful place. And James hung every single one. The front room had long since filled, so they expanded to the hallway, then to the bedroom, then to the new addition they built when Samuel was born. Everywhere you looked in the Zimmerman house, you saw sunrises. Visitors commented on it, sometimes confused, sometimes charmed. "Why so many paintings of the same thing?" Mrs. Patterson asked once. Laura and James looked at each other and James answered, "They are not the same thing. Every sunrise is different. Every day is a new beginning." "That is a nice thought." "It is more than a thought," Laura said. "It is how we live." The children grew up surrounded by art. Thomas showed an early talent for drawing, and Laura taught him what she knew. Rose loved the paintings but was more interested in the stories behind them. She would point to different ones and ask her mother to tell her about the day it was painted, and Laura would remember. "That was the morning it rained. That was the day after your father got the promotion. That was painted when I was pregnant with Samuel and could barely see my easel over my belly." Samuel, the youngest, was fascinated by his father's work with horses. He would follow James around like a small shadow, and James patiently taught him everything he knew. "You are raising them well," Laura told James one night after the children were finally asleep. "We are raising them well. I could not do this without you. I think you could, but I am glad you do not have to." Years continued their steady march. The children grew, and so did Kingfisher. What had been a rough frontier town became more established, with a proper school and a church and even a small library. Laura donated some of her work to the library, landscapes and portraits, though never the sunrises. Those stayed at home. James eventually bought a small share in the ranch where he worked, a reward for his years of loyal service and good management. It meant security for the family, money for the children's education, a future that felt solid and real, but their routine never changed. Every morning that she could, Laura painted the sunrise, and every Sunday James would look through the week's paintings and choose which ones to hang. "We are running out of space again," Laura said when Thomas was 10, Rose was 8, and Samuel was 6. I know, I have been thinking about that. James, we cannot add another room. The house is already huge. I know, but what if we did not add a room? What if we built something separate? A real gallery just for your paintings. Laura stared at him. That is ridiculous. Why, we have the land, we have the money saved, and you have hundreds of paintings now, Laura, hundreds of sunrises. They deserve their own space. They are just paintings. No, he took her hands. They are the story of our life together. Every single one marks a day we have been blessed to see. They deserve to be honored. So they built a gallery. It was a simple building, wooden with big windows and white walls. James hired workers and supervised the construction himself. When it was finished, they spent weeks moving paintings, hanging them chronologically so you could walk through and see the progression of years. The first sunrise, the angry orange one from before they met, held the place of honor. The last was from the week before, a soft morning with clouds like pink feathers. Look at this, James said, standing in the center of the gallery, turning slowly. Look at what we have created. You created this building. No, you created all of this. I just made sure it had a place to live. The gallery became a landmark of sorts. People would ride out from town to see it, and Laura started charging a small admission fee. The money went into an account for the children's future. Thomas wanted to go to art school back east. Rose talked about becoming a teacher. Samuel was still young, still deciding. Laura painted, and James hung the paintings, and their life together unfolded like the sunrises themselves, full of color and light and the occasional storm cloud that made the brightness more precious by contrast. Thomas left for art school when he was 18, and Laura cried for a week. But he wrote often, long letters about his classes and his new friends and the things he was learning. He came home for summers and brought his own paintings to show his mother, who critiqued them honestly and hugged him proudly. Rose did become a teacher. She taught in the Kingfisher school, and she met a young man named Daniel who worked at the bank. They married when she was 21, and Laura painted a special sunrise for their wedding gift, one with a double rainbow arcing through golden clouds. "It is beautiful, Mama," Rose said, crying happy tears. "I will treasure it always." Samuel went into ranching with his father, and together they expanded their holdings. The Zimmerman Ranch became known throughout the territory, and later the state, for quality horses and honest dealing. "You raised good kids," James told Laura one evening when they were alone, the children all grown and gone into their own lives. "We raised good kids. I could not have done it without you. I could not have done any of this without you." Laura looked around their house, still full of paintings, still full of light. "I never imagined this life. When my father died and I stayed here alone, I thought I was just surviving. I never dreamed I could have this. What is this? Everything. You, our children, this home, this life. It is so much more than I ever hoped for." James pulled her close. "You gave me everything too. You gave me a reason to stay in one place. You gave me beauty to look at every day. You gave me a family and a purpose and a love I did not know existed." They stood together, holding each other, surrounded by 40 years of sunrises. Laura kept painting. Her hair turned gray, and her hands developed arthritis that made the brushwork harder, but she painted. James's back grew stiff from years of ranch work, but he still hung every painting she created. They became old together, the way people do when they are lucky. Their grandchildren visited, filling the house with noise and laughter. Thomas had 3 children and taught art at a university. Rose had 2 and raised them in Kingfisher, close enough to visit often. Samuel had 4 wild ranch kids who loved horses as much as their father and grandfather. "We have had a good life," James said one morning. They were in their 70s now, and the sunrise Laura was painting was soft and gentle, all pale gold and white. The best life, Laura agreed. Do you have any regrets? She thought about it seriously. No, not a single one, do you? Only that I did not stop to watch you paint that first morning sooner. I wasted 25 years not knowing you existed. But then we would have met when we were different people. Maybe we needed to be who we were when we were to become this. You are probably right. You usually are. More years passed. James developed a cough that would not go away, and the doctor said his lungs were giving out. Decades of dust and hard work, the doctor explained. Nothing to be done but make him comfortable. Laura nursed him through that final illness with the same fierce love she had given everything in their life together. The children came often, and the grandchildren, and James held court from his bed, telling stories and offering advice and making sure everyone knew how much he loved them. I am not afraid, he told Laura one night. I have had more than any man deserves. Do not talk like that. You are not leaving yet. Laura, my love, we both know I am, but it is all right. I am ready. I just need you to promise me something, anything. Keep painting. Keep painting those sunrises. And when you are done, when each one is finished, I want you to hang it. Can you do that, James? I cannot reach the high places anymore. Then get Samuel to help, or one of the grandkids, but promise me you will keep hanging them. Promise me the gallery will keep growing. Every sunrise is a gift, Laura. Every single one. I want the world to remember that. I promise. James died 3 days later on a morning when the sunrise was brilliant red and gold, like the sky was celebrating even as Laura's heart broke. He died in their bed in the house they had built together, surrounded by paintings of every morning they had been blessed to share. The funeral was attended by half the state, it seemed. James had been respected, even loved by many. But after everyone left and the food was cleared away and the children reluctantly returned to their own lives, Laura sat alone in the gallery, surrounded by sunrises, and wept. She had known loss before. Her mother, her father, friends over the years. But losing James felt like losing half of herself. He had been her partner, her love, her witness to every day for 42 years. The house felt empty without him, even filled as it was with their children's visits and the evidence of their life together. But she had made a promise. So the next morning, Laura got up before dawn. Her joints ached and her hands trembled, but she set up her easel. She mixed her paints, and when the sun began to rise, painting the Oklahoma sky in shades of lavender and pink, she painted. It hurt. Everything hurt. But the painting helped too. It was a meditation, a prayer, a way of saying she was still here, still witnessing, still grateful for the gift of another day even though the man she loved was gone. When she finished, she called Samuel, and together they hung the painting in the gallery. It went up next to the last one James had hung, and Laura stood looking at them both, tears streaming down her face. He would be proud of you, Mama, Samuel said gently. I hope so. She kept painting. Every morning, every sunrise. On the days when her arthritis was bad, she painted small. On the days when grief threatened to drown her, she painted dark. But she always painted, and she always hung them. The gallery grew. More walls, more paintings. Thomas came home to help her design an expansion. Rose organized a fundraiser that brought in money to make it official, to turn Laura's gallery into a real museum that would be preserved after she was gone. You have created something important, Mama, Rose told her. These paintings are not just art. They are history. They are a record of this place this time. They matter. They were always just for me and your father, I know, but maybe they can be for others too. Maybe they can remind people that every day is a new beginning. That is what Papa always said, right? Yes, that is what he always said. Laura lived to be 83. She painted almost to the very end. Though her last paintings were small and simple, her hands no longer capable of the detailed work of her youth. But the sunrises were still there, still beautiful, still honest. She died peacefully in her sleep, in the house she had shared with James, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren she had never imagined she would have. Her last words were about the sunrise the next morning, wondering what colors it would bring. Thomas painted it for her as best he could, a tribute to his mother. It was not as good as hers, as he freely admitted, but it was honest. And Samuel hung it in the gallery, the last sunrise in a collection that numbered in the thousands. The Kingfisher Sunrise Gallery became famous over the years. People came from all over to see Laura Evans Zimmerman's life work, to walk through decades of Oklahoma mornings captured in oil and canvas. Art critics called her a folk artist, a primitive, an outsider genius. But the people who came, the regular visitors who made it a pilgrimage, they called her paintings something simpler, beautiful. And on the wall by the entrance they hung the first painting. Not the first Laura had ever painted, but the first James had ever seen. The angry August sunrise with light fighting through darkness. Beside it was a small plaque with words James had written shortly before his death, a description of the gallery for its eventual opening to the public. My wife painted sunrises because they reminded her that every day is a gift. I bought them all because they reminded me that beauty is worth preserving. We hung them in our home because we believed that the place you live should reflect the things you love. This gallery is our gift to all who seek hope, all who need reminding that no matter how dark the night, the sun always rises again. The house itself remained in the family for generations. Samuel's children inherited it, and then their children. It was carefully maintained, kept just as Laura and James had left it, full of light and love and paintings of sunrise. The gallery continued beside it, a testament to two people who had found each other in the wild, raw days of Oklahoma territory and built something that would outlast them both. Every morning, the sun still rises over Kingfisher, Oklahoma. The sky still turns gold and pink and sometimes angry red. And in a gallery on the edge of town, thousands of paintings bear witness to the truth that Laura Evans learned all those years ago. That hope is real, that love transforms everything, and that every new day is worth celebrating. In the end, James had been right. They were not just paintings. They were not just sunrises. They were the story of two people who met by chance and loved by choice, who built a life together one morning at a time, who created beauty not in spite of the hardship of their world, but because of it, as an answer to it, as a defiant declaration that even in the hard places, joy can grow. The cowboy bought all the paintings and hung them in their home. But more than that, he gave the artist a reason to keep painting, a witness to her vision, a partner who understood that what she created mattered not because it could be sold, but because it was true. And she gave him a home, a family, a life that proved you do not have to stay broken just because you were once shattered. Together, they turned a small house on the Oklahoma prairie into a sanctuary of light, and they filled it so full of sunrises that anyone who entered could not help but feel hope. That was their legacy. Not just the paintings, but the love that made them matter. Not just the gallery, but the life lived fully and honestly and joyfully despite everything that tried to dim it. And every morning, somewhere in Oklahoma, someone watches the sunrise and thinks of Laura and James Zimmerman and feels a little less alone.